Okay, welcome everyone to this edition of Sthayi. So today we'll be discussing about, we'll have Ms. Lakshmi Parvathy discuss about issues related to transgenders. So transgenders even today are a marginalized community in several ways. And one of the steps towards remedying this situation was the formation of Transgender Welfare Board in 2008 in Tamil Nadu. So Ms. Lakshmi Parvathy will be taking us through the history of transgender community in general, and then several aspects of the movement that led to the Welfare Board. I'll give a brief introduction to Ms. Parvathy. Lakshmi Parvathy did her Masters in Developmental Studies from IIT Madras. She worked with the Niti Aayog as a young professional fellow for a couple of years. And then she's currently at the Center for Public Policy in IIM Bangalore. She's interested in issues of development philosophy, gender and social justice, and how they translate to public policy. So thank you very much, Ms. Parvathy, for making it to ICTS. I'll hand over the mic to.
This talk. Okay. Just this way. Yeah, sure. Can you just stick to the story? Okay. Cool.
So good evening all. Thank you for having me over here. And thank you, Ganga, for that introduction. Okay. Okay. So I think without much delay, I'll just move on to the topic of discussion today. So most of us have seen transgenders in most probably in red light signals and maybe in trains and but they're very boisterous sound. They're very draped in very glittering sarees, very hard to go unnoticed, right? But do we really know what their story is, what their journey is? And do we really know who is a transgender? So today we'll be trying to understand this question of who is a transgender. And trust me, this is a question that the Supreme Court, the government, the civil society, the community, everybody is trying to still understand and grapple with it. So this is vaguely the structure that I want to follow. We'll keep asking this question of who is a transgender, and we'll try to understand where are the various communities of transgenders in India. We look at the timeline of landmark legal judgments that has affected transgenders, and then we'll focus it down to the particular community of Aravanis in Tamil Nadu, and what all are the distal and the proximal factors that led to the formation of a welfare board for the transgender community in Tamil Nadu. And we'll specifically look at the Transgender Welfare Board, what are the policies that they had taken up, and how is it performing today? And finally, we'll try to understand how it has translated or how various other institutions are taking up the issues of transgenders. So this is the World Health Organization definition for transgenders. It's transgender, they refer, is a term for people whose gender identity and expression does not conform to the norms and expectations traditionally associated with the gender assigned to them at birth. It includes people who are transsexual, transgender, and generally gender non-conforming, and they may self-identify as male, female, trans woman, trans man, transsexual, or by a variety of indigenous terms, such as Hijra in India, Koti in Thailand, and Vadia, or many other transgender identities. So, and Hijra, for that matter, is a very South Asian term, and it can be loosely translated to eunuch in English. But unlike eunuch, not all hijras are necessarily castrated. So these are some of the stats. The census 2011 actually counted them, and they said there are around 4.9 lakh others in India. By others, it's the census counted male, female, and others, and therefore others. And the highest proportion of the population was in UP, 9% in Andhra, followed by Maharashtra and Bihar. And most of them are found in rural India. So, as compared to the general population whose literacy rate is at 76%, we find that only 46% of this population is literate. Much lower working rates at 38%, and only 65% of them work for more than 6 months in a year. So I think before I go there, I just want to conceptually clarify a couple of things. These are some, notions that we have to keep in mind when we are looking at or when we are trying to understand pure matters. So these are two tenets we'll look at, and here we'll have male, female, transgender into trans men and trans women. Sexuality rather is about who they are attracted to. Now here we'll have the categories of gays, lesbians, and bisexuals. Now, as against that, we'll also look at, so we understand sex as differently. This is the biological notion, and this will be, gender is usually considered as the social construct, the experience of being a woman. Now, this is considered to be not changeable, immutable. This can be changed. That's the idea. So, coming back to the groups, communities in India, this is the least known transgender community in India, Jogappas. They're very close to us, like, or no, I don't know. They are in North Karnataka, and they occupy priestly role of the goddess Yellamma, and therefore they are very respected in the community. So if they, by which I mean an astrologer or a priest in the community find that there are feminine characteristics in boys, young boys, or they find that, say, one of the boy has very persistent fever which could not be treated through other medicines, they would say that he has got divine possession, which means he will be offered sari and muttar on the lines of Mangal Sutra, which means that he will have to dedicate his whole life to the service of God. Now, Jogappa is considered to be a conduit to the god, and which means that they can go and seek alms in the households, the temples around, and they'll be paid, and that's their major source of income. They also participate in rituals and pujas, and other means of livelihood are astrology, palmistry, folk songs. And there was one performance they had with Sri T.M. Krishna very recently. They are forbidden to marry, to castrate, or to do sex work, which also means that they do it hideously, and it makes it all the more difficult for HIV prevention work to get to them. Yeah. The other community, it's in Andhra Pradesh. They are on the similar lines of Jogappas, are said to be possessed by or married to Lord Shiva. Shiva and Shakti, that's the combination they assume, and therefore Ardhanarishwara. And they undergo sex change operations as against the earlier group. And they also have their means of livelihood as astrologers. They live happily with their family, and they're respected by a local community. They have festivals wherein from around the world people come there, and homosexuality is expressed freely there. And therefore, HIV prevention activities, or by this I mean that they are accessible. They are accessible to talk, or they are accessible, they're more exposed to the community. Kinnars. Kinnars are generally a term for hijras in North India and western part of India. They worship Aravanis and Bahuchara Mata. We'll talk about them later. They have a very rigid Jamaat system, about which also we'll talk about later. And she is Lakshmi Tripathi. She has written a couple of books, and she's the head of the Kinnar Akhada. Kinnar Akhada recently shot to fame when they demanded their need to go to the Kumbh Mela, and they have been doing it since Ujjain Kumbh Mela. They aim to reclaim their religious identity and freedom of the transgender community through that. They're very active in elections. Madhya Pradesh, they have a couple of their candidates actually winning mayor elections. Now, coming to Kotis, it's not a location-based group. It's a rather heterogeneous group. And they are biological males showing varying degrees of being effeminate. And some hijras identify as Koti, but not all Kotis identify as hijra or even transgenders. Now, coming down to the group of our discussion today, Aravani or Tirunangai, they are the community of transgenders in Tamil Nadu. They identify themselves as women trapped in male bodies, although many Aravanis would also love to be called as Tirunangai, which translates to the most respectable women. They dress in saris or feminine dresses. They give themselves feminine names. They undergo sex reassignment surgery, which is a treatment in different stages, wherein it begins with a counseling session, and they undergo hormone replacement therapy. Then they go removal therapies and then reconstruction therapies. So, and the stage at which they have gone through the whole surgery, and that stage of identifying with the perfect male body, that's when they have attained nirvana. Now, most of these Tirunangais are also heteronormative, which means that they are married to men, cisgender men. Cisgender men are men who associate themselves with the gender that has been attached to them since the birth. And most of them are Hindus in Tamil Nadu, and followed by Muslims. And once they join the community, they follow both the religions. They have deities from both the religions. They have ghetto-like existence, more like in North Chennai. And once they leave out of their home, they just run away from their homes while they figure out their gender identity is not matching, fearing abuse, shame, and all that. And once they run, and they might run out around 5 or 7 or 8 years of age, or later up till 10. And during this period, once they leave the home, they are absolutely on their own, and they face enormous amount of abuse and difficulties without even having any education. So the public reaction to transgenders has generally been very ambivalent. They have definitely a transphobia, wherein they also respect with the fact that, or fear them for the fact that transgenders probably have this capacity to bless them or grant a bane to them also, curse them also. So this is one of the reactions that one of the transgender told me, that on the one hand, the people treat me like God. On the other hand, they treat us like dirt. So where do they go when they run away from their home? They have a structure of support that meets their social, familial, and economic needs of transgenders. This is called as Jamaat. And Jamaat is basically a structure which is defined in terms of female relationship. It's a fictive kinship, but for instance, when a young transgender comes to seek shelter, an elder transgender can take that transgender in, and eventually that transgender can be called the daughter of the transgender who has taken her in. And in southern parts of Tamil Nadu, it's called as gurus and chelas. And this process of this ritual of adopting a transgender is called as madi katrathu, which is literally meaning tying to the stomach. And the young transgender pays a very nominal amount to the Jamaat for us, something around like 5-10 rupees. But later on, whatever the guru or whatever the mother is doing as a profession is usually taken up by the transgender who joins her, and which means that she'll do sex work if the guru is doing sex work, which also implies that she'll have to give all the money that she has earned through sex work to the guru. Now, this has become a very contentious issue often a lot, and has ended up becoming, ended up creating a lot of arguments between gurus and chelas and amongst chelas also. So we talked about sex reassignment surgery, and the Pal ceremony is after nirvana. It's a process of initiation into the household. Now, going back to the authoritarian and oppressive part of Jamaat, there are many reported violence within Jamaat. The Jamaat is a very strict. There are social rules and there are punishments for breaking those rules. Like when you see a guru, you are expected to touch her feet. When you see a guru, you are not supposed to disagree with her guru a lot. So these are instances where the transgenders and their gurus have a lot of problem. And amongst chelas also, because of the fact that there are increasing difficulty to find income, there are a lot of differences and fights between this unit of household. Now, yeah, and in rural areas, it's more oppressive, and urban areas, importance is actually given to the welfare, the mainstreaming of the transgenders, and the urban areas also witness transgenders as a more independent and liberal vein. So this is given the fact that the Jamaat system is less strict in south of India than in the north of India, and this actually explains probably why the kind of activism that we saw in Tamil Nadu was not happening anywhere else. Now, we also find that there are a lot of transgenders are moving out of the professions or the traditional professions of Badai, Mangti and all that, and they are also started to work, working in SAGs or CBOs. CBO it means community-based organizations. And which means that even if they're working with their guru, they can overrule their guru. And this is a kind of, a different strategy or different tradition that they have followed till now. And so there is this increasing tension between mainstreaming, which means they are becoming more independent and liberal, and the fact that going back to traditional way of living in Jamaat is also problematic. So here we look at the queer existence in India, and to just quickly go through this, the ancient legal traditions did not have a strong prohibition of homosexuality. We have a lot of scriptures talking about homosexuality, and medieval India also shows that there were many homosexually inclined people, and the legal front was also not very tolerant. Yet we don't find that there were any instance of public torture or execution of transgender individuals. However, the colonial period saw the intensification of the homophobic voice as it actually originated in the Western world. Now, it came through different discourses of law, medicine, and literature. And this particular act for the registration of criminal tribes and eunuchs, the local government was required to keep a register of the names and residences of all the eunuchs who were reasonably suspected of kidnapping or castrating children. Now, what does Section 377 do? We have to criminalize transgenders on the basis of gender and the LGBT community on the basis of sexuality. They talk about unnatural offenses, which means that whoever voluntarily has carnal intercourse against the order of nature with any man, woman, or animal shall be punished. Anything that is sex for pleasure was problem. Sex for procreation was fine. That's the basic thing. These are the basic timeline of the landmark judgments that happened on Section 377. Section 377, I think here it is important all in the case of transgenders and LGBT also. But here we will look at both of the communities, and then at one point we'll distinguish. So in 1994 only, the first PIL against Section 377 was done in High Court. And in 2001, we find that the NAS Foundation had filed a PIL in the Delhi High Court. They dismissed it, saying that the body did not have a standing. And 2009, we saw the landmark judgment that decriminalized homosexuality among consenting individuals, arguing that this was in violation of the fundamental rights of 14, 15, and 21 of the Constitution of India. 2013, we find that there were several appeals made to the Supreme Court of India, and the two-judge bench observed that the community as such is a very minuscule fraction of the country's population, and that very less number of people have been prosecuted here. And they set aside 2009 verdict and made or recommended that the parliament should address the matter. Interestingly, it is the same year that the expert committee on the issues related to transgender persons was set up by the Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. And in 2014, we find that the most important legal decision, the judgment that came about that recognized transgenders as the third gender. The Supreme Court said that they have to be provisions in laws regarding marriage, adoption, and they have a right to self-identification through a psychological test rather than insisting that sex reassignment surgery should have been done. They directed the central and state governments to have proper medical care, provide them with public toilets, and various socio-economic rights, admissions to public education institutions, jobs, and to spread public awareness and seriously address problems such as fear, shame, stigma amongst the community. 2015, we saw a private members bill. It was voted out. And 2016, we again see that there was a PIL filed against Section 377. 2017, we also saw that the Right to Privacy Act, as being a fundamental right, came about. And they also remarked that the sexual orientation is an essential attribute of privacy. They finally, in 2018 September, Section 377 was struck down as saying that it is unconstitutional and that it's an infringement of the fundamental rights of autonomy, intimacy, and all that. Very interestingly, if you look at it, the 2013, they had reinstated Section 377 of IPC. It is in the same time they accepted transgenders, who is also a community that can be punished under the ambit of Section 377. But that's what happened. Okay, so what do you think that happened in the late 1980s that could have garnered the attention to the transgender community? It has showed up? Yeah. Okay, so yes, AIDS. The first case of HIV was documented in Chennai among the sex workers. The international funding flowed in, like they were on the task of controlling it. And this went to a spree of NGOs that came up in Chennai, which also came to be called as sexuality funding. And the task at hand for them was to identify communities which were at risk for HIV and start off anti-prostitution activities. There was a WHO study done during the same time, and they identified that men who have sex with men and transgenders were having high-risk sexual behavior that would lead to the spread of HIV. Once after the program or the intervention started, it became a platform for transgenders collectivization and for identifying their own pressing issues of rights, of what is their identity, and what should be done to protect their own dignity. And then there were questions about how the funds were being utilized and all that. Following that, they moved from NGOs to CBOs. CBOs will be owned by the transgenders themselves and will be working for the community themselves. What are the other factors that probably led to the kind of mobilization that the transgender community had in Tamil Nadu? The transgenders themselves argued that the Tamil Nadu government and the Tamil Nadu society in general had this influence of the Dravidian movement, and the hierarchy was denounced, and it was accepted populism with the state to appease and across different sections of the society. In 2001, we find that the government has formed the TANSACs and started funding interventions among transgenders and MSMs. And 2003, we find that a subcommittee that was formed for rehabilitation of transgender people, although the word rehabilitation wasn't defined. This was a time when the transgender community moved from a strictly sexual health protection discourse to that of identifying what is their rights and dignity. Talking about the role of women's movement in India, they were actually confused about the transgender as an identity. The Western movement, on the other hand, they had the transgender issues or LGBT issues coming out of the women's movement in the West. But here, sexuality was never talked about. Although State Women Commission was playing a very important role in helping the transgender community to understand what are the different models of transgender social protection schemes done across other countries. And they also became a jury of public hearing and all that. We find that the role of media and theatre has been very important here. Kannadi Kalai Kulu was a group of theatre group, and they talked about the lives of Aravanis. And most of the leaders of the transgender group had associations with the progressive writers, and they wrote extensively about them. Although the mainstream media had done enough damage by depicting transgenders as objects of ridicule and stereotyping, they formed an alternative media movement through Nadodi Film Society. And once Ms. Kanimori also attended their performance in Tanjavur, and she spoke up for them and argued that she'll fight for their rights. Public political activism of transgenders has been on the front since then. So in 2003, they filed a writ petition in the Madras High Court for voting rights, and 2004, the High Court ruled that they could choose to vote either as a male or female. They were not satisfied with it, but without further funding or wherewithal to do what next, they just left it at there. But this actually got them a lot of media attention. And they also featured in the DMK manifesto in 2006, where they said that they'll take necessary steps to address the transgender issues in 2006. Now, in 2006 late, we also find that the sexual minorities of Chennai and lot other parts of Tamil Nadu came together and had a rally, had a pride march. It had a huge turnout and widespread media coverage. And they finally submitted a recommendation of what should be done to protect and give respect to transgender community to the Social Welfare Department. The public hearing on December 2007, it saw overwhelming testimonials of violence and discrimination faced by transgenders across the state. This jury also submitted a lot of recommendations. One of the most challenging, group to interact with, yeah. Sorry.
Transgenders?
Yeah.
Is it?
The census 2011 counted 22,000 of them.
Okay, that's not that big a number for them to consider that as a vote bank, right? For DMK?
Not really. So, but they have other reasons also, which I'll come to it later.
Okay.
And it was necessarily not about the fact that they are a vote bank in itself, but they were recognized as probably voters very recently. They didn't have ID cards till then, right? So it's only in 2003 that they fight for the ID cards and their voting rights. So that's probably the ticking point. Yeah, so we were talking about how transgenders would have a lot of direct interaction with police officers, often in instances of them needing a lot of help. And they argue that if the police officers are not sensitized enough, they might also end up, discriminating or abusing the transgenders. So they took up a lot of sensitizing for police officers also. These are the pictures from the transgender rally. And yeah, so we find that transgenders, NGOs, these are the sexuality NGOs we are talking about, and they are from E-Road, Bangalore, Trichy, Nagapatnam, and here also there are from Kanchipuram, across Tamil Nadu also. This was a public hearing, and we saw a lot of overwhelming testimonials here by transgenders, wherein they are abused in public and private also. Yeah. So this is another site of political mobilization of transgenders. Kuvagam is an annual festival that happens in Virupuram. And transgenders from far and wide attend this festival. The general public attends this festival too, seeking blessings of Aravanis. This is actually based on the reading of Mahabharata. We'll talk about that in the video. And there are also a lot of activities that are happening on the eve of this Kuvagam, which includes rallies, book release, and various competitions and HIV prevention activities also. The video was filmed by Nowness, which is a international media group that looks at trans and different subcultures across the world. Any quick thoughts? Or? Okay, so we find that there are two models here. One of them has been away from her family, and the other has been with her family, and one of them also has a boyfriend. And the main point that I want to bring back is that fashion show is not the only thing that happens. Of course, this was the most appropriate one that I could find, which was largely reflecting on the whole activities that happen at Kuvagam. And the other point that I want to highlight is the fact that the kind of attention that they get by conducting such an event. Once it is, I was told in the personal interview that once Miss Rajati Amal, wife of DMK leader Karnadati, also attended this festival, and she promised that she will take care of their rights and needs. Sorry, So if you have got the narrative, then probably I wouldn't reflect on it, but it's largely the Aravan, which is the god in Kotandava temple. From his name only they get the name of Aravani. It's as per the Mahabharata subaltern reading, which says that for the final war, Krishna suggested that there has to be a bali of somebody, and Aravan was chosen. Aravan was the son of Arjun in Ulupi, the Naga princess. And while he was asked, what is your last wish? He said that I would like to get married and spend one night with the woman. Nobody was willing to do that. So Krishna took the form of Mohini and got married to him. When the day he died, or he was sacrificed, Krishna mourned, or the Mohini mourned the death of Aravan. That's how is what is enacted all throughout. The transgenders identify with this identity of Mohini here. Yeah. So after all those factors came into place, we had the Transgender Welfare Board on April 15, 2008. There were 10 official members from various departments of the government, and there was advisory role for the Aravani community representatives, 8 of them. And what were the policies taken by them? There were transgender specific policies, which included self-employment grants or sewing machines or domestic animals. And there was a short stay home built in Chennai also. And other way was to give access to the existing government schemes. They didn't have an ID card. I mean, they wouldn't be able to take a SIM probably or open a bank account. Now they were given ID cards and ration cards, where part of SAGs, then land pattas were given, housing was given under Ayoj Indira Awas Yojana, and pension. There was SRS being done in Kilpauk and Madras medical colleges, reservations in college for higher education. The number of transgenders identified through enumeration was 3887. And the distribution of ID cards happened up to 2411. This is a very old numbers. I did file an RTI, but I didn't get a response from them on the recent numbers. This was the program of distribution of ID cards. This was the ID card that was given. And like to give something, like to give a ration card, you have to identify who is eligible, who is a transgender, right? Now the government defined here that transgender is Aravani or Tirunangai, who lives full-time in clothes of women and who has undergone the surgery, whether it is a medical surgery or the standard castration that is done traditionally. Now, here major criticisms came against the government, where they went on to define the category of transgenders into Aravanis, and they are male to female transgenders here. Now, what happened was, given that this is a community that didn't have much income or economic resources, they were taking this deal of accepting whatever was given as benefits or redistribution measures. Now, it's not necessary that all transgenders or Tirunangais itself would have undergone the sex reassignment surgery. Either they can't or they can't afford to, because it starts from 2 lakhs or above, or they have some health issues, they can't do a sex reassignment surgery, or mere choice, they don't want to do SRS. This excluded the category of female to male transgenders, which was not visible, as much as male to female transgenders were, but even the institution and the culture that accepted Tirunangais were not accepting Tirunambis. For instance, a doctor that agreed to perform a surgery on Tirunangai was not, ready to perform a surgery on Tirunambis. Now, this in fact created a lot of divisions within the community. Now, there are senior leaders of the Tirunangai community which ended up saying that, this is our struggle. We have won our battle. Now, Tirunambis should take care of, their own needs, and they should demand with the government of whatever they want to do. The whole video we saw, all of them were Tirunangais. And the second most important criticism that came about was that most of the measures that they had taken were, immediate steps, ad hoc steps that doesn't necessarily address the real structural issues there. So, for instance, when they gave reservations for Tirunangais in colleges, they didn't make sure that they had a toilet there, right? They didn't make sure that the people around or the students around were sensitive enough to behave properly with them. They were abused there also. So, the argument here is that whatever struggles or whatever changes you are pushing for has to come with a cultural change also, has to come with a mindset change also. The best example, another one, is the instance of Kochi Metro Rail Limited. What happened there was, it was celebrated so much to give employment for transgenders in Kerala, and they would not able to find housing for staying around the Kochi Metro. And they were, they faced a lot of abuse and discrimination even from the people who traveled in the metro. And the state itself was very confused. I mean, even the judgment said that this is a group of eunuchs, Aravanis, or transgender or trans women. They didn't really know. I mean, they were not conscious enough. They were not sensitive enough to understand what the community needs and take into account the identification that they want. So this is a very starking question that one of the transgender asked me, that if I'm called as a third gender, then are men the first gender automatically? Who said men as the first gender? So she's directly pointing us towards inherent gender binary that we have. Even our language, statutes, or any institution for that matter has only male and female. Now that we have another whole lot of possibilities, we are wondering about where to start the change. Like right from adoption to marriage, a lot of statutes has only mentioned male and female. Even for that matter, in Kerala right now, it's a huge debate as to what should be the word that should be given to transgenders or female to male transgenders or male to female transgenders. So this is the very recent step that we have right now regarding this transgender rights. So the transgenders rights bill was it was a private member's bill in 2016 when MP Tiruchi Siva, DMK person, introduced it, and they remained pending, and then the government introduced the transgenders persons protection of rights bill in 2016. A whole lot of criticism was raised against it, because they said they had very random definitions, such as Tirunangais are neither male nor female, a whole lot of definitions without consultations with the community. Now, it underwent 27 amendments as per the suggestions of the Standing Committee, yet it fails to uphold the Nalsa verdict, and which says that they have the right to self-identify. The 2018 bill says that you need to have a district screening committee, which is part of the district welfare board in each districts in across the states, and they have to, the transgender who identifies themselves as trans men or women have to apply with them, and they will undergo a screening with a medical officer, psychiatrist, and other transgender members in the community. And it also mentioned that a mandatory SRS must be done for somebody to identify as a man or woman, and this went against the fundamental right to self-determination. The bill criminalized the act of begging, and the bill also states that they should live with their natal family. These points were stemming from a clear lack of understanding about the community. Now, if you look at it, the Tamil Nadu Transgender Welfare Board is also going against the Nalsa verdict right now. So they are not following the Supreme Court verdict, and they are not yet giving ID cards or recognition to Tirunambis. So yeah, so that's pretty much all I had to talk about right now. If you have moved a little bit closer in identifying and understanding what the community is right now, or what are the possibilities of being a transgender, I think then my job here is done. So happy Women's Day.
Three questions. First one is, you told the Tamil Nadu government only provided them a reservation, so it's not all over India, or Indian government isn't doing anything because bring them to mainstream schools or education system. Because as far as I know, most of the, I have only seen NGOs working for transgender rights and all, not the government so much. Second question is, Jogappas, you told that the priest decides that whether, by the feminine character and all, but being with feminine character and identify with a woman are two different things.
Sorry, I didn't get that.
So you said in Jogappas, the priest decides by seeing a feminine character in boys or something, people who are biologically born male, that they should be Jogappas or convert them to females or something. But displaying female characters and identifying yourself with a female are two different things. Is it somewhat forced in those cases? And this second one, so are people working against it that they have to mandatory go a sex reassignment surgery and conform to a man or a woman? Because they can identify themselves as transgender as they are born with, right? So these are the 3 points.
The last part again.
Yeah. So how to identify a transgender is a mandatory reassignment surgery, and after the surgery they have to identify themselves as man and woman. So are there people working against it? Because
yes, definitely. So this is something that goes against the Nalsa verdict, which said that they have the right to self-determine, which means that they don't have to do a psychological, biological test, but only a psychological test, which, they have to say that this is what I'm feeling about. For instance, in Kerala, they have recently started with the District Welfare Commission. They're saying that anybody who, musters the courage to apply for being a transgender, they wouldn't do it for faking it, right? For the sake of benefits. They would be feeling for it. And therefore, they are saying, the committee panel is saying that they will be able to identify transgenders and those who are faking it. So there are a lot of, so initially the Kerala government also had done identification through screening boards such as this, which had medical doctors and all that. What happened was most of these screening boards ended up being another, instance of abusing them. They would say, take your clothes off. I need to see what is there, kind of thing. So they, then the NGOs or the sexuality right organizations in Kerala filed another PIL, and they said that, we don't need such a district screening committee. We need some panel with only transgenders, and they will decide who will get the benefits. So that's about the third question, and the first one was about?
Is the intergovernment working on?
Right. The central government has definitely a certain role, because I think they are the ones who talked about the transgender. They had set up a expert committee on improving the conditions of transgenders much early in like 2013. And they have suggested that all the state governments come up with whatever, they have given a framework of what the state governments should be doing with regard to all of these. So definitely the central government has a lot of role, and there are certain legislations that needs to be changed at the central level. So definitely yes.
But apart from Tamil Nadu government, nobody has put this reservation and all. That's what I want to know.
So yes, I mean, just hold on. Here. So these are the Transgender Welfare Board that has been already established.
Okay.
So if you look at them, it's not necessarily boards. A lot of states have done independent schemes for transgenders. Yeah. But why Tamil Nadu? Because it started in 2008. And 2008 is the time when nobody was talking about it. Like even the Supreme Court was, not even thinking about it. So that's why Tamil Nadu. We had attention.
Person chooses to be either male or female, but they can choose to be the trans man and trans woman, I guess, right?
So trans man is somebody who has transgendered already, like they have transcended their gender identity, and it's not necessary that they would have undergone the surgery, yeah, or trans women for that matter. But it's a matter of identification, right? And if one person who has undergone the surgery also says that, I just want to be known as transgender, then that's it. Or they just want to be known as perfect female, that's it. Yeah.
About a smaller fraction being educated of trans people, right? So are there separate schools for them, or are they admitted into regular schools, or how is their education?
So normally it's upon the state to decide, but they have reservations in schools also. But again, there are a lot of challenges they will face in terms of, just infusing transgender doesn't mean that they will stay.
Right.
It will depend upon the kind of atmosphere they get there. But Kerala has a school for transgenders alone, which is called as
Exclusively for?
Yes, that's only for transgenders.
But that's not there in other states?
No, not yet.
So you mentioned sensitization of the police at some point. Has there been, what steps have been taken to sensitize law enforcement, and has there been a measurable impact of
Sensitization of the armed forces, you say?
of the law enforcement, like of police and so on? Have there been, what sort of steps are being taken, and has there been a measurable impact of?
Yes, definitely. I mean, the one instance where they have been sensitized enough was in Tamil Nadu. And I think that was a lot because of the kind of active political leaders that Tamil Nadu has had in transgender communities. And there were many instances where transgenders would have ended up in a fight or a scuffle with a private or another person, especially during their soliciting for sex work. They would be, immediately meeting a police officer, right? Now, what if the police officer itself is a transphobic person, and they would definitely not register their case, yeah, or they would rather exploit or abuse them there itself. So yes, there has been a very significant impact in Tamil Nadu, wherein the transgender community leaders have gone on to say that now we have a lot of friends in within the group. Now, it's not saying that the whole of police is has been acting transphobic, but yes, some of them were. But a lot of engagement has helped them understand what the communities face.
They conduct special workshops or something, or how do they go about this?
They did conduct workshops and sensitizing. That the photograph that I show you.
I had one more question, which is, have there been any studies measuring public opinion about LGBT issues in general, and has there been a trend towards, has there been a positive trend, or is there anything known about what the public perception is and whether we're moving in the right direction?
Right.
Or not?
I think there was one NGO that Sthayi, this was South Asian Association for Trans individuals. They had done a study regarding that, and there has been a lot of exposure to the questions of being a transgender and a lot of exposure to what these communities are. But the closer engagement is very less. So you see a transgender, that's it. You know that identity exists. But in terms of knowing, what is that identity constitutes of, what is their experience, they themselves are also quite, knit amongst themselves for that matter. So I don't think, I don't clearly remember what the study said exactly, but they did do a study, and it had shown positive results in terms of having the exposure, a better idea of what the transgender communities exist, and the LGBT community also.
So first, is this person who's giving the seminar a transgender?
Yeah, she is.
Okay. So I was actually thinking about the question, and I was going to ask, does she identify herself as a transgender? So when I'm using English, the word she and herself is like automatically used, whereas in Tamil, like you can use like avanga, so kind of like that. So introducing more vocabulary itself could be like creating awareness, I guess.
Yes, right. We were just talking about how language itself is, constructed in such a binary. We are really struggling to understand or, suggest words that could contain the different kind of identities that are within the fluid community like transgenders. It's a very difficult thing, and it's just that we have to be conscious about it right now. So I interviewed her once, and when I was speaking to her on phone, her voice was not transformed then. So it sounded like a male voice. I called her him. And she was, not concerned about it, but it was actually throwing, me a question that what is my idea of associating a particular voice with male and, associating a female voice with that of female. So it's a very inherent thing. It's very difficult to, engage with it. But yes, everybody is on a process, so yeah.
I have a question actually. So the Transgender Protection Bill, and this in the US there's another similar thing called Sesta Fosta, which are worded, the title itself is ostensibly for the protection of trans people or protection against child pornography and things like that. But in effect, it turns out that they work completely against what the title suggests. So my question is were these things, like the fact that the title says that it's supposed to protect transgender people, but all the provisions are completely oppressive and things like that. Was this malicious, intentional, or was it like out of ignorance of our policymakers? And where is the bill right now? Did it lapse? Is it still being debated?
So it's in Lok Sabha right now, and it's actually the ignorance of the policymakers, I would say, because it's not like they could have had consultations. The Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment had an expert committee report on this. The expert committee had people from across the country, and they were specialists in these areas. And they had a pretty good report on that. And even the Nalsa judgment, if you look at it, it's a very well-written document. And they emphasize on the fact that they have this right to self-identification, and you are not the one who will decide what they are, right? Now, given all those documents up there, if they are coming up with such a document as a bill, then it's their ignorance. And I don't know if it's malicious, but the central government have necessarily not taken a stand on the issue, even when it was going on in the Supreme Court. They said that it depends on the wisdom of the court to decide whether the 377 should be struck down or not. So there has been voices from the current central government which said that they do not really agree with striking down the whole section of 377, but parts of it, like keeping the parts where children protection is, said about in the act. But they are completely overlooking the fact that this is based on the assumption that transgenders pick children from the streets and just transform them into transgenders. So they could have done a really better job with regard to the bill.
Lapsed because the last session of parliament ended. This is not one of them?
I think this is one of them.
So this is lapsed.
Supposed to be, yes.
Okay, good.
So when you showed the number of people who have the ID card now in Tamil Nadu, so it seemed like 1% or
yes,
or probably 10% here.
Yes,
Yeah.
very less.
Why is that number so small? Is it because it's from 2010 or?
One thing, yes, it is a number from 2010. This is based on a UNDP report that was published at that time, which said that the Tamil Nadu Transgender Welfare Board is a best practice case study that we could follow in other states. This was just starting off, and we really don't know what is the other, category in census. Wow. This is 2011 numbers, but this might include Tirunambis also, right? Yeah. Here we are talking about only Tirunangais in welfare board. So we don't expect to come to the full numbers anyways.
The other thing is, does Aadhaar have this option of declaring yourself as other?
They do. So what happened after the 2014 judgment, which recognized transgenders as third gender, they were included in IRCTC booking system. Yeah, they were included in NCRB, National Crime Records Bureau. Initially, they had a report that came out saying that crimes committed by transgenders. Now they have scrapped that report, and they say that crimes committed against transgenders. And so there are a lot of forms, or like application forms, which have transgenders columns right now. That is one of the major changes that has, happening or beginning to happen after the 2014 verdict.
Does Swachh Bharat at all have this inclusive aspect to it? Because they're building these public toilets, right, as part of...
Right. So yes, the Supreme Court verdict has directed the state governments to create public toilets, but I don't know for sure if Swachh Bharat, the program as such, has provisions for separate toilets for transgenders. Yeah. There are community toilets, but even there, they will have separate, rooms for male and female. Yeah.
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah, sure.
The organizational structure, you talked about these CEOs. What kind of an organizational structure do they have? Is it pan-India or is it local? Do they have their own publication? How do they?
It's a very local, organizations. So even in Chennai, when I was about to start my study in 2014, there were like 20 of them in Chennai itself. So one thing that probably, explains the spree of the NGOs is the fact that they had a lot of funding, and their needed separate institutions to work on different aspects of the HIV prevention program. So there are a lot of them. They have created a lot of material, but most of them being established by transgenders themselves are not in a stage of publishing reports, but they have like very basic raw materials on whatever the movement has been undertaking or doing all throughout from the 1990s.
Let's thank Ms. Lakshmi again.
Thank you.
Book or something which documents the organizational structure, because the trans people are the in India are the historically most organized.